What's up, everybody? Welcome to Gojo with Mike Golick Jr. That is me. With me, as always, super producer extraordinaire, a man who is ready to head to championship weekend, Brandon Newman. Brandon, what's going on?
Football! Nothing much, Mike. I thank you so much for handing me the Bengals pick.
Of all the things that we're going to get to on this podcast and of all the excitement that there was on the divisional round of the NFL football weekend here, the thing that is going to haunt me the most is talking my own stupid peanut brain out of going 4-0 on the weekend in my picks by getting myself to pick the Bills because of the freaking Bengals O-line.
I cannot believe I didn't realize you went 4-0, and I'm disgusted by it, but that's your own fault because you're such an offensive lineman. You're like, oh no, offensive lineman, they're going to lose the game.
That's not how we sound. We're the infinitely smarter side of the ball, but I understand your point.
Oh, wow.
I literally had a friend of mine say, oh man, your Bengals pick was a great call, only to be horrified and realize that they stopped listening at the start of this, that, and the third and didn't stick around long enough on Friday to hear me going under. I tripped over the goal line. I fumbled the bag so famously. Oh,
I'm the one that should be offended that they cut out before this, that, and the third.
That is true. And as always, if you stick around for this podcast, make sure and appreciate we appreciate that you make sure and download, subscribe, rate, and review Gojo wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a 5-star rating and a review, and check us out on the DraftKings YouTube channel under the Gojo with Mike Golick Jr. tab there. We got a great show for you guys today. Full NFL Divisional Round reaction. A lot of hilarity ensued, especially in the nightcap, Brandon. Lots of existential questions that are going to get asked about a few teams that lost this weekend heading into their offseason. We've also got drama from the NBA over the weekend that also involves the NFL and a new reality dating show ready to capture the hearts and minds of rural America. But Brandon, how about them Cowboys? Boy, oh boy, do they, if nothing else, know how to deliver incredible storylines even in a loss coming off a weekend.
I mean, it's nothing new to us, Mike. We graduated and was fortunate enough to play football at the University of Notre Dame, and we're headline kings. I don't know what to say. I expect us to. Now, we've probably been in the big dance more recently than the Cowboys have. Obviously, that didn't go so well. Sorry to bring that up right now, but we all were sipping the blue Kool-Aid that was the Cowboys possibly making it to the NFC Championship game again.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we played for the Dallas Cowboys of college football in its own way, and there's a lot of parallels to that, including, unfortunately, the drought in championships that goes back a couple of decades. So as we come off this weekend where we now have the championship set in the NFL, the Philadelphia Eagles will host the San Francisco 49ers. In the NFC, the Kansas City Chiefs will host the Cincinnati Bengals. In the AFC, that means that the Dallas Cowboys in the Sunday nightcap are going home. They lose in a defensive barn burner, 19-12 to the San Francisco 49ers. Had to warm your heart, Brandon, because especially through 2.5 quarters of this game, both defenses were firing on all cylinders. And I have to be honest, through 2.5 quarters of this game, the Cowboys defense in some ways looked like the more dominant unit with what they were able to do. They were shot out of a cannon in this game, and Dan Quinn deserves a lot of credit. The energy his unit brought was a winning effort. They just could not sustain that intensity through 4 quarters.
And the intensity is the perfect word for it, Mike, because they were fiery. They were just like nasty is a term that I want to use talking about the Cincinnati Bengals that makes me feel like they have an edge going into this playoffs. But like the Cowboys defense were playing nasty and fast. Everyone talks about defensive battles not being entertaining football games. I think this was the anomaly. And obviously the 49ers just looked worse because they had to deal with Dak running the ball a little bit more. But the fact that the 2 biggest plays of the game came in the third quarter from big splash plays was everything I, as a defensive lineman, love to see it.
Yeah, so this Dallas Cowboys defense certainly balled out at the beginning, was able to sack and really make Brock Purdy uncomfortable a lot in the first half. That was the rookiest that Brock Purdy had looked. I know a lot of people will go back to Wild Card Weekend and say starting off a couple of errant passes, overthrows on wide open players versus the Niners. But in this game, all of the things that Kyle Shanahan was normally able to do to help out his rookie Mr. Irrelevant quarterback, moving the pocket, getting guys out, using the screen game, were all undone by Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, and that Cowboys defensive front being able to get after guys.
But still, even when Brock Purdy looked like the lights were too bright, he still was making plays that I felt like he shouldn't have been able to make. Like, I love the fact that they highlighted the quote that Kyle Shanahan said that this is the most poised rookie he's had at any position this entire time that he's been an NFL head coach. Says a lot about Brock Purdy. It says a lot about what we've seen. But the things that he was getting out of trouble, making insane plays. Like, we're going to obviously get to that Kittle catch eventually, but Mike, I was still impressed by him. Obviously, he's going to go to playoffs and he won the game, so it's easy to be impressed by. But I was impressed even if they were to lose that game.
The point I guess I want to make for him, because finished the night 19-29 for 214, no touchdowns, no interceptions, got sacked twice. This is who Brock Purdy has been in my mind. He's been good, he's been poised like you mentioned, but all of that is relative to expectation. Right? They did not win the game because of this player. They won this game because the defense was able to force 2 turnovers, and then their rushing attack was able to get going in a big way in the second half of this game. San Francisco finished with 113 yards and a touchdown on the ground, and I thought that completely changed the balance, and that was when they were finally able to take the edge off the Cowboys defense. As much as I'm sure people are going to continue to love up Brock Purdy, and understandably so, because of that poise that you mentioned, he is not the story in my mind as far as why the San Francisco 49ers were able to win this game. He is part of it. He is not the one that I should say will get all the credit, especially because people are going to want to make this a Brock Purdy did X, but Dak Prescott wasn't able to do Y game.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Dak, because in my mind, I think of this game and I feel like the Cowboys lost it. Like, I know the 49ers were the better team coming into the game, but it just felt like there was multiple, and you can talk about Tony Pollard going out, because we talked about how much we loved him, and he was very dynamic until he got knocked out of the game the same way Patrick Mahomes got knocked out of the game. But I thought that the Cowboys looked like the better team, but I'm so thankful that they didn't move on.
So, yeah, there was that feel for a long time. And to your point, Tony Pollard being carted off the field in the first half, it appeared that his leg was in an air cast. Devastated for a guy that had such a great year. Finally seemed to be getting his chance to be the explosive piece in that offense the Cowboys fans have been clamoring for the last couple of years. Absolutely affected an offense that I thought was more creative than the 49ers on the ground in the first half. I thought they were calling a really good game to that end. It was, for the Cowboys, being undermined by the first Dak Prescott interception that you can debate whether it was more on Dak Prescott or the receiver. It was a comeback where the receiver looked like he pulled up. Dak Prescott had some pressure in his face and let that ball go, where the corner was able to easily undercut it and intercept that ball. The second Dak Prescott interception, where he was throwing a slant into traffic, I think it was Charvarius Ward that ended up tipping the ball to Fred Warner, who intercepted it, where Dak just did not see the player down in the zone. He was reading Dak's eyes and made a play on the ball. That one was Dak Prescott's fault, and as they highlighted on the broadcast, Dak Prescott had 10 interceptions under pressure in the NFL this season, the most in the NFL, including 2 during the Cowboys' loss today. He threw the most interceptions in the NFL this season. That was a part of his story, and Brandon, I feel like this game was the full Dak Prescott experience all in one, especially for this season, because there was a lot of really good plays built in there for Dak Prescott, especially with his legs. I thought he made the continuation off what happened in the game before, 4 carries for 22 yards in this game, but more timely than anything, right? Mm-hmm. Breaking, and when there was man-to-man on third down, breaking loose for a first down in the red zone, being a part of their game with a read option play off of some counter action. That's all the stuff where I thought Dak had really taken a step, made some big throws down that field. There was the really nice completion that was just as much CeeDee Lamb later on in the game, but you also had that aggression to a fault on some of those giveaways that are a reminder that now we've got a big enough sample size with Dak Prescott to clearly say, all right, there's obviously the group of elite quarterbacks at the top of the NFL with the names that we know, Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, some of the guys in that tier, and Dak Prescott is in the next group below that, right? He is not physically as dominant in those guys, and this year was not as consistent as those guys, especially when it came to turnovers.
Well, that was after he came back from injury, Mike, and that's what you talk about, this game being the full Dak Prescott experience. It's like, ooh, those balls are so nice and crisp. He's very accurate. Like, how could anyone question it? And then he feels the weight of Cowboy Nation on him, and he starts to force some throws that just seem like you would expect somebody as vetted as him not to make or not to force. But obviously him being in that second tier of quarterback, Mike, it seems like removed from Amari Cooper no longer being the number one option at wide receiver and those big chunk plays being taken off the field, it seems puzzling why we still have to lean on Dak Prescott to win these games for the Cowboys. Like, obviously, we talked about the injury, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it seems like there should be enough weapons for the big star team, America's team, but it's just Dak trying to make shit happen.
Well, yeah, and the best version of them, and that even includes when Cooper Rush was on the field, was certainly leading with Love on the ground. We said they were almost stubborn to a fault as far as jamming that in the last game when they were able to win against Tampa, but this was a much better opponent. And so I'm sure there's going to be people that do the thing that call for Dak Prescott to be moved on from or somehow, like, that's not the answer to the Cowboys' problems.
Well, if they're trying to move on from somebody, Cowboys Nation, I think they need to look at the kicker position before they look at the quarterback position, because Brett Maher, M-A-H, Maher. Yeah, Maher missed a lot of kicks. But best tweet I saw was from Andrew Siciliano, who said he lost his putter, but he still has his driver. Let him try these long field goals. And that was before he hit his one that kind of, I guess, eliminated his yips.
Yep. Oh, no, I think we all breathed a sigh of relief. It was tough to watch for Brett Maher, who on the first extra point try, it was thankfully blocked. But as they pointed out on the broadcast, that thing was going to hook left. He was still, and there was some, we'll call it gamesmanship from the 49ers in the pregame warm-up, who were sort of messing with Brett Maher during the warm-up. A couple of guys going over there and not letting him get set up in those ways and trying to start to play the mental games. And it looked like it was going to get ugly, but he did. He went 2 for 2 on field goals, 0 for 1 on extra points. But even that affected some of the decision-making on fourth down for Mike McCarthy in the first half of that game. And in one where the margins were this close for the whole time, that certainly swung some of that as far as strategically putting them at a disadvantage. And so I don't want to make it sound like it was all Dak Prescott. Those interceptions were bad and absolutely undermined a team that looked like it was getting some things rolling offensively. But you couple that with the injury to Tony Pollard, and then late in the game, some decision-making from Mike McCarthy in key moments down the end of this game that now are going to invite the conversation about his job, Brandon. Like, I don't think Dak Prescott should be at all worried about his situation in Dallas. There's things that need to be improved upon, but I think now we're going to have that renewed conversation about Mike McCarthy until we hear something concrete from Jerry Jones.
Yeah, but he's one of those coaches that you feel like, I want to say it's the Cowboys position, but Mike McCarthy is one of those guys that will always put himself in a position at the end of the season. They're talking about his job and whether or not he deserves to keep it.
They will be, but when Sean Payton's looming in the distance and he's the one that's always been that sort of rumored apple of the eye of the owner of your team, that's going to be an even. And when it ends the way it did, Brandon. So we look at the end of this game where down the stretch, you saw both coaches. I know, and I've heard Mina Kimes talk about this in the past. Kyle Shanahan, incredibly conservative in some key situations in this game, including settling for the field goal late that ended up putting them up 7 at the end of the game. Brock Purdy, it was a sequence where they threw the ball with Brock Purdy on a second down, but then weren't going to go for it on fourth down in that situation and didn't use up enough clock because, again, you had a coach that is simultaneously lauded for getting his quarterback to a spot where he's comfortable, cutting balls loose to George Kittle down the field, throwing tight window slants to Christian McCaffrey for first downs, making some of those clutch plays. But on the other side, seems to almost have defensive head coach tendencies with the unit that he's got there, where he kind of shells up in some of those spots and said, I'm going to let DeMeco Ryans in the defensive side of the ball bail us out. that happens, and so you've got these opportunities at the end to win the game for Mike McCarthy where you're down 7 and get a chance to drive, and you've got a bad drive where probably I'd say the biggest indictment of Dak Prescott in this game was the second to last drive for the Dallas Cowboys. They take over after that field goal, and they're in the shadow of their own end zone. Dak Prescott almost throws a pick to Dre Greenlaw on the very first play of that drive. On the second drive, almost takes a sack in the end zone. On the second play of that drive, overthrows or underthrows a deep shot where he had a receiver wide open and then underthrew it there. And then the Cowboys get into this bind where now all of a sudden they end up on third down. Dak Prescott takes a sack, and you hear Greg Olsen very calmly explain that they got to send the punt team out there right now if they're going to punt and not go for it, which you can argue at that point, your defense looked gassed. You need to give your offense a chance to go win it then. But if you're going to punt, you've got to make that decision immediately, get them out there so that when the other team gets the ball, you can burn timeouts before you get to the 2-minute warning. And instead, you give the 49ers a chance to end the game on their terms. And that's before we get to the final play for the Cowboys, Brandon, which I think might go down as one of the funniest plays in NFL history.
I mean, I didn't see it. I saw Zeke lined up as center, and then I started preparing for the show because I was like, nothing's going to happen here. What happened?
So, yes, you were correct. The final play, they had Zeke Elliott line up at center to snap the football. He was ineligible. And then they lined up multiples of their offensive linemen out in each side at wide receiver spots. And I can't even tell you what they were going to begin to do, Brandon. If they were going to try and create some back and forth scrum situation so they could play pitchy woo woo or what. What it turned into was Zeke snapping the football, getting ready to block the nose, and then getting dump trucked into Dak Prescott's lap, and then Dak Prescott throwing the ball quickly out of his hands and having the receiver immediately get tackled upon reception.
Stop. I'm pissed. I can't believe I missed that. You described it perfectly. That's amazing.
It was one of the funniest things that I have seen in quite some time.
Mike McCarthy, the decisions come in so slow, and then when you see them matriculate in front of you, you're like, what in the hell is going on?
It was bad. And so it seemed like the ultimate galaxy brain play where we've done Hail Marys for so long, everyone's kind of looking for another way to do this. And it's just like, sometimes it's just got to be the simplest solution. And we're not going to reinvent football all on one play. I always applaud innovation, but this was one of those spots where this is only going to serve to make your team more memeable.
I mean, you'd either do 4 verts or you do the button hook in pitch play. Like we've seen the MAC score with some of those plays, Western Michigan against my lowly Ball State team. Like, yeah, we just needed that. We didn't need the fake field goal punt or whatever the hell.
It looked like the swinging gate from an extra point.
Yes.
That we see sometimes. Be effective when you've got to go a short distance. Wasn't sure how that was going to work. I would love to see the way that was drawn up on the page, because that's another one of those plays that I think looks really good when you've got it on the paper that you pass out in the install meetings and the team meeting. And then all of a sudden when you've got to run it in real life, Zeke Elliott finds out that playing center is a little harder than some people might have an appreciation for. So if nothing else, we get to come out of it with that. So Brandon, when it's all said and done, the Dallas Cowboys defensively have very little to feel bad about in this game. For a very long time, asserted their dominance. We got the highlight, unfortunately, for our guy Mike McGlinchey. He was on the receiving end of one of the more vicious modern hump moves from Micah Parsons that had him full horizontal in the air. Word to the late Reggie White on that.
Yeah, I mean, that was beautiful. And it's Micah Parsons, who was all over the field yet again today. Like, I always feel like he needs to be lined up, as a 6 or a 5, just as a pass rusher to get into the groove of it. Dude just plays football.
It's so weird because Micah Parsons ends this game with 4 tackles and only 1 solo, and that hardly seems indicative of just how often he shows up causing problems. But it was a full Cowboys defensive effort in this game. Like, Deron Bland and Leighton Vander Esch ended up tied for the team lead in tackles, but it was that entire front that really got after it. Bad dropped interception by Trevon Diggs at the end of that game too, which I know it was off a tip, but that's going to haunt him.
No, yeah, that could have saved the game for them. But I think the Cowboys fans will remember when Leighton Vander Esch was their top scorer or top tackler. They were a pretty bad football team.
They said he's one of the most improved guys there. Either way now, Brandon, for this team going forward, Dak Prescott certainly has to clean up the interceptions next year. I'm one that generally appreciates aggression in most spots. A couple of these were not aggressive interceptions. The second one especially was not. And the one to Dre Greenlaw, the almost interception at the end, those were bad eyes plays, so those have to get cleaned up. But I'm inclined to believe he is going to be there. If I had to bet on someone who's not going to be showing up at the start of next season, I would imagine if Jerry Jones could get Sean Payton, that's going to be something that he cannot help himself but do. I'm not saying even Mike McCarthy totally deserves it, but I'm saying if you're the Cowboys and you're going to look to angrily make someone answer for what's gone on, that seems like the spot. Like, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I believe Kellen Moore has gotten some interviews for head coaching positions. I'm sure Dan Quinn's name is going to get talked about again, their defensive coordinator. And we know there was a fear for a while of letting Kellen Moore walk out of the building if you were Jerry Jones. I don't know if that same fear exists now that Sean Payton's name is back into the mix here. So I think there's a pretty real chance, just because it's Jerry Jones and it's the Cowboys and there's this need to certainly make yourself the most interesting thing out there. The most interesting thing Jerry could do would be to fire Mike McCarthy and bring in Sean Payton. It wouldn't surprise me, even if it's something that may not be the most advisable.
Well, we know if that happens, there's going to be a full hockey line change from the coaching staff, the players. So I don't. The Cowboys are in a rebuild again.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because it feels so close, especially defensively. And the offensive line, I thought, played really well for a lot of this game, going up against a really good 49ers defensive front. Was able to keep Dak, by and large, clean in this game. But that one went sideways and was much more entertaining than the early game, Brandon. We had Bills and Bengals. The Bengals win 27-10 in the early Sunday game. And this was probably the biggest surprise of the weekend, and the thing that we established off top I got the most wrong. The Cincinnati Bengals were starting 3 backups on their offensive line, with their starting left tackle, right guard, and right tackle all ruled out of this game. Lel Collins, their right tackle, had been out for a while. And with 3 backups in, they absolutely dominated this game up front. In the first half alone, the Bengals had 275 yards, the most yards the Bills had allowed in either half this season, and 90 of those came on the ground. It was the second most rushing yards the Bengals had had before the half this year, and more than they had in the first half of any of their previous 4 games combined. Burrow was sacked only once and was only pressured on 7 dropbacks. It was, game plan-wise, Brandon, something that allowed them to lean on the defense early, get downhill in a way that, listen, as a former offensive lineman and one that was a backup for a while and had to go in, it's a lot easier to get yourself settled going forward and trying to hit someone as opposed to backing up and having to try and catch a dynamic athlete rushing the passer. But for the Bills, rushing the passer wasn't really in the cards either. It was a dominant performance by Cincinnati, game plan-wise and offensively up front on that O-line.
I mean, for a team that prides themselves on their quarterback passing the ball, talking about Joe Burrow, it seemed like the offensive line was always moving forward.
Always. It was, I don't know, Brandon, again, just, it was the thing I was most concerned about in the game, and it ended up being their biggest strength. Joe Mixon went over 100 yards in this game. Watching him and Hayden Hurst dominate the middle of the field against Matt Milano, who was talked about a lot as a first-team All-Pro and a linebacker core, and really a safety group. The spine of that defense has always been the sell for the Buffalo Bills, starting with Ed Oliver in the middle, going through Milano and Edmonds in the middle linebacker room, and then going to Micah Hyde and company on the back end of that defense. And And that was the exact area where Cincinnati was able to have a lot of their success. And it was shocking. And it's why they're moving on with a chance to play in back-to-back AFC championship games and potentially back-to-back Super Bowls.
Yeah, but I feel like this win, unlike last season's win, where it was like, okay, what am I watching? How are the Bengals here? Okay, they're at the Super Bowl now. Like, this is very confusing. This team that beat the Chiefs in the regular season, Week 13, and how they finished off the Bills at home for the Bills. First time the Bills have lost a playoff game at home since the 1970 merger. This team looked like great. Like, this team looked like a Super Bowl contending team. This team looked different than they did any other time in the season for me. Like, it looked like we were watching the Bills that had got to this point where it was just such a dominant quarterback play and all facets of the gameplay. And that's one of the things, obviously, I'm a Ravens fan, so I'm obsessed with complimentary football. No complimentary football was played for the Buffalo Bills, and Josh Allen looked like year 2 again, and it was very odd to see it.
Yeah, the development of this Bengals team is definitely something, right? And this was, again, to fully set the scene, the rematch of the Week 17 game that never happened. Damar Hamlin, who was injured in that game, was in the building for this game. They showed him on the broadcast. He was watching the game up in a box with ownership. He had been talking to the team, like all of these things that you wondered what the emotional lift would be like. There's snow falling in Orchard Park. All of it seemed so set for the Buffalo Bills to go out there and do their thing, and anything but happened. And your point about the Bengals is well served. I said last year after their run, that was as bad as the Cincinnati Bengals were going to be for quite some time. Because their offensive line last year, we know, was just a non-compete. The amount of hits and sacks they gave up on Joe Burrow, it was going to be the easy priority for the offseason the way that it was. And when they addressed that, and when you had that 12 or so game stretch where the same 5 got to go out and start, you saw improvement. You saw consistency. And now they've won something like 9 games in a row with that consistency. And to see it really, in this game especially, at the high water mark, done on both sides of the ball on both lines of scrimmage, with their offensive line doing what we just described and their defensive line going on the other side and making life really difficult. I mean, you saw Trey Hendrickson sack on a 3-man rush. That as an offensive lineman is inexcusable. When they rush 3, you were supposed to be able to give the quarterback all day long to make plays downfield. You're supposed to have 2 double teams and another guy locked down one-on-one, and that's supposed to be one where there is no clock in your head. It should be a challenge to your pride that they rush 3. And instead, we saw Trey Hendrickson beat Deion Dawkins pretty quickly for a sack on that play, and it was indicative of what that front really did all day to the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, you're talking about. We talked about the parallels, Mike, but it really looked like the Bills was missing starters on the offensive line. Like, we've seen DJ Reader like wreak havoc all season long, but I mean, these Bengals defensive line, they look like names. They were. Josh Allen looked scared. It was like he did not want to get hit. And this is a snow game, Mike. It was very, like you said before, like it was odd to see, but the Bills didn't look like the Bills, and that's what was probably the most disappointing thing watching the game.
I'd push back on the Josh Allen thing a little bit, because what Josh Allen looked like was what it looked like during a lot of the season. He looked like their only option. He looked like the only thing that was working for them. Like Brandon, he was their leading rusher again in this game. Again, the amount of times that has had to happen because they've never really developed a dedicated ground game for conditions like this. The fact that he had to drop back and throw the ball 42 times in this game and had the 1 interception mixed into that is because he's really their only option. Like, I understand Tony Romo really loves making big play Gabe Davis as a thing happen, but as a number 2, he's not been a consistent enough threat outside of a couple of big moments to really allow them to do the things they want to do, opposite what ended up being a very frustrated Stephon Diggs. And so what you end up seeing is Josh Allen, when you talked about him reverting, I think part of that was, we know, like that happened with the Kansas City Chiefs, teams were going to change the way that they played them. And for a while, it seemed like Buffalo adjusted. Then Josh Allen dealt with the elbow injury, the UCL injury. And then after that, it seemed like it got back to pressing. Like, all right, I've got to go and make something happen, because if not, there doesn't appear to be enough for me in the structure of this offense to make it happen just playing the way I'm supposed to.
Yeah, but Mike, it looked like they were literally playing on ice. Like, I know it was snow on the ground, but it was odd to see that the Bills couldn't get their footing in Orchard Park, but the Bengals were like, Joe Mixon looked like a ground and pound guy.
Brandon, it looked like one team was wearing cleats and one team was wearing sneakers. You're absolutely right. I was blown away by how comfortable Cincinnati looked in the conditions that are supposed to be. Like, I half expect the headlines in the papers in Buffalo tomorrow to say dome the stadium, because they looked like a team that needed to be inside on a fast track.
Or maybe it's something to do with the wear and tear of the season and all the emotions. And I can't imagine, like, just how emotionally drained that entire franchise is, especially like you mentioned before. But this first time Damar Hamlin was actually in the facility, walking around, talking to people, and everyone was feeling so thankful to be around him again. Like, I think that's a big part of this whole game, and the emotional, probably how emotional it was coming back in that, the 2 kickoff returns. Like, that team is splintered in a very interesting way we are all looking at it from media standpoint. It's like, oh, they have the perfect narrative to run behind. But I can't imagine how, like, emotionally exhausted they probably were at this point.
Yeah, and that's something we'll on the outside never know the full extent of. But you're right in that we'll never know how much that affected them. And that would be the most deeply understandable thing to have affect you given those circumstances. We talked about it. It's outside of anything we've had to see a team go through in quite some time. As far as the rest of the on-field stuff, defensively, we know they had backed up their chips on the Von Miller thing. And once that didn't work, it became glaringly obvious those guys that they brought in, Greg Rousseau, AJ Epinesa, the guys in the interior that were supposed to develop under Von Miller. Where part of it I always thought was, Von Miller is the point of the spear when it comes to your pass rush in the postseason, but he's also supposed to be the guy that, runs the pass rush summit, is supposed to help these guys start to develop as a teacher inside the room. That hasn't happened as quick as it needs to. And so now you've got to worry about in the offseason how you go about addressing that. Because when you look at what's going to come up for them in free agency, Jordan Poyer, Tremaine Edmonds, and Shaq Lawson are all impending free agents this upcoming season. On offense, you've got Roger Saffold on the offensive line, a couple of backups on your O-line, and Devin Singletary. So this team is going to look very different, and probably should. We've seen them go the last, they had the Von Miller splash free agency move, and the last one it felt like they had before that was the move to go over and get Stephon Diggs from Minnesota. And so now for Brandon Beane and company there, it's got to be what's next, because they were the Super Bowl favorites this year. This felt like this was supposed to be their best punch. And we saw it is possible with Philly to retool. It is possible to be like Kansas City and find a way to work through and reimagine your identity a bit, especially around a great quarterback. But it's still a challenge in its own right. And there's got to be a little bit of soul searching and some definite change that has to be made in Buffalo, because you were the team that everyone picked and fell woefully short this year.
So many futures ruined. But I feel like the Bills fans, if they can be mad at anyone, it's the NFL for pre-selling those tickets for the Chiefs-Bills game. Because, talk about bulletin board material. It really feels like the Cincinnati Bengals were gassed up about it. It was like, remember when the Bills fans donated to Andy Dalton because, oh my gosh, was it the Bengals? They got them into the playoffs for losing or whatever it was.
Their win got the Bills into the playoffs to end their postseason drought.
Yes, that was 2018. But it felt like the bulletin board material was too much. The Bengals fans or not Bengals fans, the players were genuinely, like, all the media people, talking heads that can gas people up and say what they want to say. That's one thing. The NFL trying to get a leg up on making money on the backs of the Bengals just losing and like throwing in the towel against the Bills, highly disrespectful.
We heard the line from Joe Burrow after the game. They better hand out those refunds. He had that one ready to go. And it's a reminder that Joe Burrow is just ready for whatever. There have been very few quarterbacks that we'll talk about in modern football that have had as much immediate impact on a struggling franchise as Joe Burrow has had here, shifting the entire mentality.
He has something that Tom Brady has, where, like, the quarterbacks that are comfortably trying to officiate the game as it's being played as well, to like, but calmly, like yelling at the refs, like, "Hey man, what are you doing? Like, he can't touch me like that," or like, "Why didn't you throw that play?" Or like, "Did you see him touch up the?" Like, Joe Burrow is really so cool. It's like he's a fan as well during the game, and that's just scary. Like he's. I know Joe Cool is like just a nickname, but like the Kansas City Chiefs. I know we're going to get to that eventually too. The Patrick Mahomes hasn't been Patrick Mahomes, it seems like, since Joe Burrow hit the NFL.
I disagree with that. I still think Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in football.
Okay, well, I guess when it comes to getting to the Super Bowl and getting past the AFC division and getting past a team in the AFC, like the team to beat in the AFC.
Well, now it becomes a really difficult conversation on that end because, yes, the Bengals have had their number. I would still push back and say the Chiefs have been the team in the AFC because last year we talked about Bengals' run was a little bit more out of nowhere. Regular season wasn't really indicative of what they became in the postseason. This year, very much equals. Very much dominant, especially after that first quarter of the regular season. So there's much more of a claim there. I don't think we're going to get a true test, and I understand Bengals fans that Patrick Mahomes was healthy for the last 3 times in a row that you have beat this Chiefs team. But Brandon, the most impactful moment of the weekend was that Patrick Mahomes high ankle sprain. Because all I could think of watching this Bengals game is, my God, they're going to find their way back into another Super Bowl. Like, it's set up perfectly for them and a hobbled Patrick Mahomes coming into this game because we saw balance from them. Like, they won a different way than we had seen the Bengals really win. It wasn't just dominant Jamar Chase and T. Higgins in this game. It was winning in the middle of the field like we talked about, dominating the line of scrimmage. Lou Anarumo, the defensive coordinator, with a gem of a game plan that had blitzers coming from places Josh Allen was never ready for. It's going to be harder to do that to even a hobbled Patrick Mahomes because he is the best quarterback in the NFL. And it's going to be harder for them to defend against the defensive line of the Kansas City Chiefs. That's got Chris Jones, Frank Clark that was a little more effective this last week, a much more dynamic pressure package. Like, it's a different animal altogether, but we've seen them have plenty of success. They know Spags very well, and so it's a challenge they're capable of, and the offensive line injuries are certainly there, but I think that pales in comparison to the importance of Patrick Mahomes being far less than 100 and far less able to create some of those magic plays that we always see.
I trust what Patrick Mahomes said when he said he'll be fine for that game. I really do. We saw the injury. I think he'll be fine. I don't know if the injury is going to play a big enough factor in that game. But Jamar Chase, the best player on the field for the Cincinnati Bengals, like him. The Hayden Hurst touchdown, I can't get out of my head, where he went for a screen and everyone ran to Jamar Chase and Hayden Hurst was wide open in the end zone. Like, they're using Jamar Chase for more than just catching the big play balls. And it was one of those like ball don't lie moments because I thought that was a touchdown in the back of the end zone that Jamar Chase had right before halftime or right after halftime. But in a passing league, the duo between the quarterback and quarterback receiver is makes a huge difference. But Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase are proving that last year wasn't an anomaly. It's just the core is that duo. It
is. And Joe
obviously
Burrow,
running the ball helps, and they've done it better than they have ever.
It does, but we also talked about like the things that the offensive line did really well in this game. Joe Burrow also deserves some credit for the help on that one. I saw Sam Hoppen, who works over at, who is a data and analytics manager on Twitter, said Joe Burrow's average time to throw this season was 2.55 seconds, which is the second quickest in the league according to Next Gen Stats. It was 2.5 seconds for most of this game where he took just one sack and so kept that thing sped up and made sure he was getting the ball out quick to not put any added stress on that offensive line. Joe's done a good job adjusting back to what the unit in front of him is now. When the season and the offensive line was healthy, I thought he did a good job sticking around in the pocket, taking checkdowns, being patient. And now he understands that is not a luxury afforded to me. Joe Burrow has been incredible about knowing where his feet are at every step of this journey, and it's why he's been able to do the thing that we talk about all the time. Seems nearly impossible because even for great quarterbacks, fit matters so much. the situation and environment that you end up into matters so much. And he went to a Bengals team that I know Marvin Lewis had taken from being a laughingstock and turned into at least more of a perennial contender, but certainly not a high-end playoff accomplisher, and still an organization that fans will tell you the front office is not one that's seen as deeply serious about winning. Joe Burrow has changed all of that with his presence, where now the biggest question remains, and I saw the guys having the conversation, I think on the CBS desk, about what the Joe Burrow contract looks like. Should he be the first $500 million arm in the NFL, akin to a Mahomes deal? I will be very interested to see what message gets sent to the fan base by the franchise with how they address that, because Joe Burrow has given you more than you could have ever hoped for. He's everything you could want as a quarterback in the NFL, and it is the most obvious choice in the world to try and make sure he's a Bengal for his entire career.
You know who else is giving you more than you could ever hope for?
Who's that?
Zach Taylor. I don't care if he looks like TJ Detweiler from Recess with his hat on forward. That guy is apparently doing something very well as a head coach. Like I don't know. Obviously, the credit for the coaches. I'm obsessed with it because I just we just laud these quarterbacks, but we just saw with Trevor Lawrence how much a head coach can really mess up your development. Like whatever he's doing to give Joe Burrow room to be Joe Burrow, like that team is like no other Cincinnati Bengals team that I've ever seen.
Yeah, I think he's a hard one, and for Brian Callahan, their offensive coordinator, it's tough because we hear a lot about Joe Burrow being given so much latitude. I've heard people reference him like a modern Peyton Manning, getting to call out of the game at the line of scrimmage. It's why you're going to hear them get less credit, because Joe Burrow's greatness shows up in so many ways that are easy to see, while that coaching is a lot harder to parse through and find.
Yeah.
So with that, I think that one, it's really hard to talk about that without the Chiefs game locked next to it, right? Just because of that injury.
That's true. Yeah, I like that.
It's difficult because, again, the Bengals did everything right in that game. It was dominant against the team that was everyone's early pick in that game. The other thing, Brandon, I think something's going to be made of the Stephon Diggs blow up on the sideline in that game, where it looked like he was reading Josh Allen the riot act a bit. Reportedly had to be coaxed, had his stuff ready to go and was ready to leave the locker room before the coaches talked after the game. Ended up getting brought back in there by one of his teammates. I'm not going to make too much out of that. That's a guy that cares an awful lot. That is, I think, a very fiery wide receiver in this league. You can do the diva receiver thing, but I think he was just pissed off in the moment because things were going bad, because that was an embarrassing loss for them at home. I don't think it's indicative of any sort of souring of the future there for him or Josh Allen as a partnership in Buffalo.
Well, I'll say this. We've heard so much reporting about them being best friends off the field, and we see it, we believe it. There's montages about it, especially during the offseason. I'll be interested if they're playing Madden together or 2K together during this offseason. Like, there's this, we've never seen this. We've seen Stephon Diggs be this type of receiver to his quarterback before, and then he got shipped over to Buffalo. Like and obviously that's not going to be the case here because Stephon Diggs is too much of a valuable player. Talking about duos with quarterback and wide receivers, but there's something there that I don't think it's something that we can just brush under the rug. But it's nothing to talk about right now. Yes, Stephon Diggs wants to be in Buffalo. He wants to win so badly. He's been that close so much, and I think he's more frustrated than anyone else because he tastes it, and he just never gets there.
I think he's also got a flair for that, like, theatricality. Like, wasn't he the one after they lost last year who was, like, standing out in the field doing the thing where he watches the other team celebrate or get their moment? He did that. I thought he did that somewhere along the line. I've never really been someone that's, like, appreciate. It's a little bit too much look at me, and I think it's kind of for show, but
I mean, as great as that championship catch was when he was with the Vikings, I didn't like that he threw his helmet off afterwards and was just kind of defensive linemen talking about wide receivers. I don't know if I can. I'm not in a space to critique.
Which is ironic because I think you guys are way more similar than you are different. But as O linemen are to defensive backs, as D linemen are to wide receivers, in this essay, I will. Brandon, like we mentioned, that game, twin spirits with the Chiefs 27-20 win over the Jags. Chiefs were better than the Jags the entirety of that game. Salute to the backdoor cover king Jacksonville Jaguars. A late field goal to go ahead and make it work with the number. We talked about that heading into the game, the Chiefs and their inability to cover, especially coming off the bye weekend, especially in this round under Andy Reid. Patrick Mahomes' injury, the headline of this game, they said the MRIs showed that he had a high ankle sprain, but it wasn't anything more than that, according to Adam Schefter. He claims that he's going to be good to go. We saw him fighting with Andy Reid and the medical staff during the game in the second quarter to not have to go inside and get that thing checked out. What it gave us was an all-time anything is possible moment. Chad Henne, who helped close out a playoff game against the Cleveland Browns a while back, had a 98-yard touchdown drive while he was out. Including plenty of really nice balls along the way, manufactured that thing to a T. It was a guy who punched his backup quarterback money-making card for another day in this league. Job well done, sir.
As someone who was backing up Mitch Trubisky years ago, I tell you what, the football guys love them some Chad Henne. I mean, and I don't hate to see it. I love it. I love someone who looks like he's a couple. How do I say this? He's a couple bad decisions away from being a defensive lineman out there slinging that ball as a quarterback.
It was a beautiful thing. Went in there, and we were wondering if he was going to end up having to stay in the whole rest of the game because Mahomes tried to gut it out for a series after that. They basically had to force that dude out of the game. You could see he was not the same guy. They show, he was trying to go under center and give an outside zone handoff and was basically having a one-leg hopscotch over there. So that's the most important thing to come out of this game. I don't know if there's going to be much will he, won't he. I think they're going to shoot him up. Toradol was trending during the game. We know what's going to happen over the course of this week. I know he wasn't in a boot after the game, but a high ankle sprain's a high ankle sprain. It's the bad kind. It's the one that's least conducive to you being able to push off and plant on that thing. I always tell the story. Our buddy Eric Olsen, who was a guard at Notre Dame, had a high ankle sprain and was basically playing on a peg leg and ended up all over BJ Raji's draft day highlight reel when we played Boston College because of it. Couldn't do anything, and for a guy in Patrick Mahomes, who we know can sling it from the pocket, does certainly do a lot of damage with his feet off platform, rolling and being able to make the extracurricular plays. The magic of Mahomes is in so many parts of it that are going to be short with that guy playing with an ankle that's probably heavily wrapped and medicated in the next game. And for the rest of this Chiefs team that certainly stepped up when Chad Henne was in, right? Career day from Travis Kelce, who was awesome. The New Heights podcast overall had a kick-ass weekend between the two Kelce brothers. But
absolutely, New Heights.
Everyone else stepped up in the way that you needed to. But Brandon, we know the way this Chiefs team bet on this offseason is they are going to be as good as Patrick Mahomes allows them to. They made the moves that they did because they understand this quarterback's that good. And so far it's been the case. Without that ankle, I have major doubts against a Bengals team that is playing as hot as they are. I believe, according to DraftKings Sportsbook, the Chiefs at home opened as 1.5-point favorites, and that was already down to 1 when I checked it last.
Yeah, I know Tony Romo put the fear of God into Chiefs fans by just trying to articulate just how difficult it is going to be for Patrick Mahomes to play like Patrick Mahomes the rest of this entire playoffs. The magic of him, I feel I'm buying the Kool-Aid. I've not seen Patrick Mahomes enough, and then when you get a chance to see him work, you're like, oh yeah, this is why they're favorites for all these games. It doesn't matter that they don't cover. Well, they 5 of 11 against the spread. It doesn't matter that they don't cover. They have Patrick Mahomes. They have a chance to win.
Patrick Mahomes is now 5-0 in the divisional round of the playoffs. He has thrown 28 touchdown passes against 3 interceptions in 10 home playoff games in his career. That's what I brought up when I heard Romo say that if the Bengals beat the Chiefs, they become the team to beat in the AFC going into next year. The reason I wasn't quite ready, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I have drunk the Patrick Mahomes Kool-Aid so much that I've got that attachment to it, but when he is healthy, what they've been able to do now over a 5-year period. Like the first 4 years that Mahomes has been a starter, you have had no fewer than 12 wins in every season. They have made it to at least conference championship weekend in every season. They have 2 Super Bowl appearances and 1 win, and the guy's got an MVP in that time. And now they're back on that stage after losing their most important wide receiver this last offseason. Hockey line changing their entire offensive line 2 years ago, and certainly moving on from key defensive parts like Tyrann Mathieu and a few others, to name some. It's been a team that's been able to live a few different lives already and maintain this level of consistency. Andy Reid going to his 5th straight AFC championship after a tenure in Philadelphia where he went to 4 straight NFC championships. We are going to have more realistic conversations about Andy Reid truly I know no one's going to touch Belichick because of all the accomplishment, but Andy Reid's one of the best coaches in NFL history. I understand. Yes. Super Bowls are a hard metric to do, right? With the Parcells of the world and a lot of these other guys that have more hardware. I understand that. But hardware is dependent on so many things that have to go right for you at certain points. Look at how consistently Andy Reid has you close, has you prepared, and how many ways he's done it. It's insane.
Yeah, that's one of the things that, especially after seeing what Henny did with that drive, I'm sipping a lot of Kool-Aid for all the coaches, but I was like, okay, as much as I've been excited and thankful that I was alive during Tom Brady, LeBron James, Bill Belichick, Andy Reid's going to be a Hall of Famer, and he is a mastermind at this football shit and eating hamburgers.
What Joe Burrow is to cool NFL quarterback quotes, Andy Reid is to perfectly time NFL head coach dad quotes. Did you see, because they announced the international schedule for next year, the Chiefs are going to play in Germany?
Yes.
And Andy Reid's quote was, "I'm excited to order a bratwurst." He's never not on brand, and it's so lovable.
I want to see it. They better get that on camera.
Oh, Andy Reid eating a bratwurst, absolutely. We've got to have a cam on him the entire time over there. I need the way that People Magazine goes out and takes the celebrities, they're just like us pictures of stars doing stuff like that in public, dressed like shit. I need Andy Reid in the Tommy Bahama Chiefs Hawaiian button-down shirt, just housing bratwurst. Or no, I guess Andy Reid would have Chiefs-inspired lederhosen. Oh, that's what we need. We need Andy Reid and a bunch of big boy lederhosen. Oh.
Ooh. Kansas City beer. Is it a beer boot? I didn't watch that movie.
Das Boot.
Das Boot? Yeah, Chiefs Das Boot?
See, this is the kind of stuff the world needs to heal. So, again, we'll talk a lot about this matchup as the week goes on. I am always hesitant to bet against the duo of Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. And the one time that fueled me taking the Bills in this game against the Bengals, that I knew I flew too close to the sun, was when both their starting tackles were hurt. They were going up against a very ferocious Tampa Bay Buccaneers defensive line. And that's where I erred in this game with Buffalo, because I forgot Buffalo wasn't rushing the passer like that since Von Miller went down. It wasn't going to be the same threat level. It is going to be different against that Chiefs defense and the pass rushers they've got. And it's different when you've got Mahomes and Andy Reid, who I'm sure Andy Reid, like you talked about, was prepared for Chad Henne to go in there and had a drive that effortlessly got them down the field for a 98-yard touchdown. He'll be ready for whatever Patrick's able to do in this game. I just don't know if against a Bengals team that outside of that offensive line does have the full complement of so much of its power is going to be too much at this point. So,
before we completely get drowned in Chiefs talk, I do want to shout out the Jacksonville Jaguars for what they did this year. Doug Peterson, the way he was able to help heal this team, and their future with Trevor Lawrence going to Waffle Houses, and also that defense. I'm excited for the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yes, and they're going to get why am I blanking the receiver that they're going to get back from the gambling suspension next year?
Calvin Ridley?
Yes, I say, so you're going to add Calvin Ridley to that receiving core. I'd imagine you're going to continue to upgrade that skill position-wise. You're going to need to get some better production defensively out of your back end. We know how much they struggled, especially in the middle of the field defending tight ends. But you're right. That's the perfect way to put it. Doug Peterson had to come in and fix a lot of things. He had to be the antidote to all of the time that was lost last year. But now that you've got Trevor Lawrence coming online, I kind of likened it to that moment when Morpheus in the Matrix is watching Neo, and he's starting to believe. That was the Trevor Lawrence that we saw start to evolve this season. And with Travis Etienne in that backfield, the young pass rushers, there's a lot to be excited about there. So congratulations to our buddy Emerson Latzia over at DK's The Sweat, who I know made the trip out to Kansas City for that matchup. I know it wasn't what they wanted. But again, take pride in the fact that your team was a cover king. Great teams cover.
Cover king.
Jacksonville can end this year on a high note, understanding that they won where it mattered most. All right, Brandon, we'll wrap this up with a look back at the game that started off the weekend, or one of the games, I should say, that started off the weekend. The nightcap of the Saturday crew. Eagles 38, Giants 7 in the least fun game of the weekends, as the Eagles came out off that bye week and ended the rest versus rust debate, at least as it pertains to this team. Yeah,
I think the Eagles are a little bit better than I anticipated that they would be. Okay, let's be real. It's ironic that the Giants hit a ceiling. I felt thankful that I bet the money line, so I didn't have to sit and chase the game. You know what I mean?
Yep, you got to let that one go. There was no chance of a backdoor cover in this one. It was over, and so you got to go on about your night. And there's something about that finality that is comforting. I'm with you. So congratulations to you on that front. We saw, I think, and you know what? This is one of those games where, to your point about Vegas, kind of should have been indicative of what might have been coming, because the fact that we had the Giants play as well as they did and spent that whole week talking and drinking the Kool-Aid about that experience and what it meant for Daniel Jones and Saquon and how good the feelings were, that the Vegas line was still over a touchdown in this game. Right? Everyone looked at, with all those good feelings in tow, it was still more than a touchdown favorite for a team in Philadelphia that I saw Ben Solak tweet it, and it's true. This and the 49ers team are the two best rosters in the NFL, top to bottom, and what they've managed to build there, what Howie Roseman and company have done for the Eagles and retooling after the last Super Bowl win and having to fire a coach and having some holdover pieces in there has been sensational. I've described them, Brandon, the Eagles are like in a post-apocalyptic thriller. They're the armored car that you eventually have to build to get out of the mall. You know, in any of those movies like Dawn of the Dead, where you're stuck inside one building and you've got to find your way out, and so you take whatever the vehicle that you've got in there is, and you nail a bunch of metal to the side, any sheet metal that you can find, any spiky shit, and you just try and put it all on there so that you can drive through and inflict as much damage as possible. They've been doing that, but they're adding mounted turrets and flamethrowers and shit like it's Mad Max Fury Road.
A lot of people had issue with Nick Sirianni comparing Jalen Hurts to Michael Jordan after the game. But I think it's fair to say, in your little analogy, the Eagles is like having 11 on your squad if you live in Hawthorne for the Stranger Things. It's a little different. These Eagles specifically, and I think Andy Reid's Eagles are stuck in our crawl, and even Doug Peterson's Eagles was an anomaly. These Eagles look like a problem for a long time to come.
I love when people get mad at coaches like that for lauding their player in a way we all don't know Jalen Hurts the way that Nick Sirianni does. And I'm sure that Nick Sirianni doesn't mean that Jalen Hurts is the best player in the league at his position and one of the best at all time, but influence-wise on their team with his attitude. And I saw Dallas Goedert was talking about it. It's he's the leader of our team. We go as he says in this locker room. We have his back in that way. He's clearly become a voice and a leadership voice that they trust. That is not surprising, the fact that his influence would be felt in that way, but people get prickly every time you bring up the NJ thing. It's just one of those comparisons you're better served staying away from, because no one else on the outside's mature enough to hear that and digest it the right way.
Yes, but I hear it and I think of a leader of men, good, bad, and indifferent, and also a walking example of leading by example, but also speaking. Jalen Hurts, I guess at his age and his handsomeness, But
just after coming off the Last Dance documentary we watched during the pandemic, it doesn't seem like Michael Jordan would lead in the same way that we're talking about Jalen Hurts leading. Michael Jordan was punching people in the face and mother effing dudes. It doesn't seem like the same leadership style.
Okay, that was the last dance. I think everybody's focusing on when he was on his way out. I think during the 80s cocaine bulls, like this is what was going on. The Eagles before Jalen Hurts was there was kind of the cocaine bulls that and Jordan kind of whipped them into shape.
I don't know. It's an interesting comparison on a lot of fronts because when we think of Michael Jordan, we think of alpha competitor, ruthless, win at all costs, all of those things. I was never sure if front of the room leader in the calm manner that we think of with Jalen Hurts in the same way. Either way, dude helped him get it done in this game. And we know Jalen Hurts, they said, playing far less than 100% in this game. I saw the stat. There weren't a lot of design runs in the finale there, but they had 6 design runs in the first half alone, according to ESPN Stats and Info in this game, where the Eagles racked up 268 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground. Like, Brandon, for all that we said about Dexter Lawrence and some of the guys up front that played well for the Giants, Jalen Smith in that linebacking core, who we know very well, a group that got hockey line change during the season, was not the same group dudes they trotted out there at the beginning. They were running for their life for most of that game. That was a Giants defense that by any conceivable metric as far as a rushing defense was near last in the NFL, and it showed. Lane Johnson, outside of looking like he was limping a little bit at the beginning, looked incredibly healthy, and that offensive line looked like the best in the NFL for the majority of that game. Brandon, they essentially ran a bunch of college sets in that game. They lined up in the normal spread gun stuff that we see college teams run all the time. They went 2x2 with the tight end off the ball, and they just ran split flow inside zone right down the Giants' throat the entire game. There were no frills. There wasn't a lot of clever window dressing. Jalen Hurts had a couple of keepers in there to keep him honest, but in general, it was just repeated shots of Jason Kelce, who might be like 2 times smaller than Dexter Lawrence, just flat backing dudes left and right in the middle of that. It was as physically dominant a performance. I know we talked about the Bengals O-line surprising relative to the skill level there. The Eagles O-line looked like the most dominant unit left in the postseason.
Yeah, the best team, best roster, period, as you talk about Ben Solak saying. But it's funny that there's a Florida storm going on. I don't know if you heard it, that thunder cracking in the background. It's very common in this Florida heat, 80 degrees today in February. Not February, it's January. It's funny that you bring up college sets, Mike, because I thought Devontae Smith, the Heisman Trophy winner, was the guy who really, really shined as a wide receiver. 6 catches, 61 yards, the average 10 yards a carry. Obviously had that touchdown, but it was when he came in and everyone's talking about his size, and we don't know if he's worth that first-round pick, regardless of the fact that he won the Heisman. It was very interesting to see. Both of those guys, like Jalen Hurts and what he did in college, this feels like an extension of what we've seen in college on a football team mixed with a bunch of other real NFL bodies like A.J. Brown.
Yeah, and they've managed to make it work. Like the buy-in across the board. You mentioned A.J. Brown. One of the touchdowns that I think Devontae Smith scored, A.J. Brown's just blocking guys into the sun. He took a Torrey Jackson and threw him out the club in the back of the end zone. It's a team full of bullies on both sides of the ball. And that was the biggest difference, like the we're not in Kansas anymore moment for the Giants in the first half, where all of a sudden Daniel Jones is under duress during those first couple drives. And so Hassan Reddick gets a couple of sacks to start this thing off in a season where they've had 70 and they've got 4 guys with double-digit sacks on the year. It was different entirely versus that Vikings team that wasn't going to do much in stopping them the week before. And so the Eagles went out every step of the way and looked like once they answered the questions about, hey, is Jalen Hurts healthy enough to go and was Lane Johnson going to go? They looked like right now the best team left in the postseason.
They look like that in the regular season too, Mike, and that's why I guess it's okay. I'll say it this way: we deserve to see the Chiefs versus the Eagles just to see who's the best team. But obviously, the NFC Championship game may be the 2 best teams that we see left in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think the one thing you can push back on that is like in this matchup in the NFC Championship game, I do wonder, all right, we saw the Dallas Cowboys defense able to stress Brock Purdy in that offense more than most people had. That first half was a remarkably human performance from an offense that is lauded for what Kyle Shanahan does, what all those weapons can do, and it took them into the second half to kind of find more of themselves going downhill in their rushing attack. And it puts a lot more on Brock Purdy, and he's been able to step up. This is going to be another ferocious pass rush that Brock Purdy's got to go up against in this game. And an Eagles team that, on offense, is going to be able to go out and, like, the Dallas Cowboys move the ball pretty well against that 49ers defense for certain stretches of that game. This Eagles offensive line is much better than that one, even. And so there's just a lot of interesting matchups all across the field for this 49ers team that heightens the focus then. If all other things are so equal, Jalen Hurts is a better quarterback than Brock Purdy. And I think this is one of those stages where we're going to find out how much that does matter with all the other things they've built up there.
There's something there, too, with him being in Philly with Nick Sirianni. Like, he seems to be the biggest fan of that team. And I don't know if we've seen a coach like that, throughout the entire season.
I mean, people call him the Pander King because he seems to do a lot of the things that he would think Philadelphia fans like. I'm not questioning whether it's genuine. I'm just going off of what I've heard elsewhere. By the way, did you see the motivational tactic he used going into this game, where he showed his team the final rap battle scene from 8 Mile to talk about, we're going to go out there and we're going to let our pads do the talking and we don't care what everyone else says about us?
Hey, everybody from the 313, throw your MF and hands up and whatever Eminem said. Yes, Mike, I love it because for a long time, I used to use that to get my own self hyped up. So the fact that Nick Sirianni knows his team well enough that an 8 Mile freestyle battle that we've all saw on television, was it over 20 years ago? Is going to get his team gassed up and ready to take on the division foes and the New York Giants. Music to my ears.
It just made me laugh that Nick Sirianni and my dad have the same idea of motivation. My dad, who famously used Lose Yourself from 8 Mile to try and motivate me and my brother to play better as football players and to own your moment and capture it when it's there. Like that same, all of that happening, by the way, on the 5-year anniversary of the Dreams and Nightmares Eagles game against the Vikings, where they beat them by the same score, where we saw on the field before the game the whole team getting buck wild to Dreams and Nightmares before that game. I said they would have been favored against God that day. It would have been the Eagles -7.5 versus the Lord Almighty, and they would have covered.
The city's at their team's back, man. There's some kind of mirroring there but obviously Philly's, I'm not going to say, I was going to say the team's better than the city, but I feel that way.
That's fair. Philly, I don't know. I love Philly. Obviously, got a bunch of family background in Philly with dad having played there. The Reading Terminal Market's heaven on earth for me. Ooh. And I love eating cheesesteak.
Amish pretzels.
Oh, the best. I bought pounds of bacon from that place. The Knicks, it's all perfect. But, Brandon, on the other side for this, because we'll get to talk about the Eagles even more, Giants in a really interesting spot. I think with them in the quarterback situation, it's a lot like, in its own right, the realization we have with the Dallas Cowboys and Dak Prescott, right? Where between the wild card round and the divisional round, somewhere in between that is the truest measure of who each of those quarterbacks is. And Dak Prescott, we talked about, is not in that upper tier of quarterbacks, but he's in the next one down. Really good NFL quarterback, a guy who's going to win you more games than he loses, but definitely needs some help and is going to be the quarterback for that team. And for Daniel Jones, who we were talking about how long the deal is going to be and how much money is going to be on the deal, also showed up in this game as not quite the guy that looked so dominant with his legs and through the air in the wild card round. I still think the way that we talked about his deal is probably going to be where they err. Something in the 3-year range, something, in the, over $30 million a year at quarterback range that gives them more long-term flexibility while short-term feeling like they've got something they can build around at quarterback. The Saquon Barkley factor complicates that a bit. Saquon Barkley, who said he's not concerned about setting the record or setting the market at running back with his deal since he's a free agent too.
I appreciate that he's open to, getting paid what he's worth via what running backs make, Mike. But I still do think that the Giants are a little bit handcuffed by the fact that their best player on offense is the running back, and it will be for the foreseeable future.
I think it's going to be interesting what it means they're able to do with the franchise tag because, again, you're right. Saquon Barkley, when healthy, was the engine for this offense for so much of the season. And with running back deals, if he's not concerned about being a market setter, I think there's a range where for a guy who's in his mid-20s, who probably still, we know he's dealt with injury, and so that's always got to be factored into it. But if you think you can get more good years out of it, like a 3-year deal with some upfront guaranteed money that's not too high above, I think the franchise tag for running back would be like $11 million a year. If you're in the 12 to 13 a year range and you can keep him on there, then maybe you do consider playing some version of the franchise tag game with Daniel Jones and say, hey, show us one more year before we're going to commit to this long term while we go out. And the charge for them this offseason is you've got to upgrade the weapons. Richie James and those guys at receiver did an admirable job. You got to get him more consistent weapons. You got to make sure he's well protected, and you got to fix the defense on the other side, especially at the linebacker level in that rush defense.
Yeah, I'm glad you talked about what they do, Mike, because my thing is I don't even know where the Giants start in the draft, of really shoring up that team, because I thought they were overachievers this year. And it's nice, they're coming from nowhere, but I don't know what you do to try to top this.
I think thinking about weapons on offense for Daniel Jones, like if you're going to go the 1-year trial route, or even in the short term, like if you're going to commit to him for 3 years or so, you got to give him weapons to go to around in that offense. You made some bets there with Kenny Golladay and others that haven't panned out. And so you've got to go back to the well on that. And then certainly linebacker on defense, like Kayvon Thibodeau was awesome. Great draft pick for you there on the edge. Absolutely. You got to get some stuff to try and shore up the middle of that defense. I'd imagine they're probably going to talk about an extension for Julian Love at safety. But, other than that, they've got plenty of spots to pick from there, and it'll depend on where they pick. But that'll be the Giants offseason, some big decisions to make around the core of that team. Brandon, we've got big decisions to make. It is Monday. We give out roses around here. Yes. We are a Bachelor and Bachelorette fan podcast that understands that roses speak the love language, not just when you buy them for $1 at the end of the night at a bar from that person that's going around and selling them. So we each get 2 roses to give out, Brandon. I want to give my first rose out for the weekend to Greg Olsen, who was on the call for the Sunday night game with the 49ers and the Dallas Cowboys, and did a phenomenal job. Like at every stretch of the way, I think Greg Olsen has made himself into one of the best, if not the best, current color analysts in the NFL broadcasting game. I think he does a good job storytelling. He does a really good job explaining complex things, like giving us the NFL verbiage, giving us the stuff that he knows from being a long tenured player, but always making sure to reset it and give it to people right. He was nails on a lot of those end game situations. Dalton Schultz getting tackled going backwards out of bounds so the clock keeps running, explaining completion percentage over expectation, explaining the punt situation at the end and how Mike McCarthy and the Dallas Cowboys made mistakes there. I just thought he had his best game at an incredibly important weekend, and he's just been really good. He's a really enjoyable listen.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, and thank you for saying that. Thank you for speaking on it, because I was going to ask you exactly why people were so impressed with him all season long, because obviously you do this thing, and for me, it's one of those things where I recognize bad. I don't recognize things done well a little bit. So that's exactly what I was looking for, Mike, because I did understand the game to an extent, but it was, there's some more color. There's just more color.
He's very prepared. He knows the rules incredibly well. He's funny and personable enough without it taking over the whole broadcast or anything like that, which I know people who have listened to me, that might be a criticism at certain times, so I understand the irony of that. But again, as far as the job, your job is to take people inside situations they've never been a part of. Bring us into 2-minute drill situations. Bring us into what the huddle's like after a turnover play, or when you're coming out for that next drive, or what the quarterback's looking on that play. And Greg's vantage point from a tight end, from a non-quarterback, I think is a really interesting and valuable one, and you see that show up in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, I think, and shout out to Kevin Burkhardt, because he's really good at what he does as well.
Yes.
Vetted in the game, but there's something about, I I'm not sure what they're looking at sometimes as someone who formerly played, and I'm just like watching as a fan. And Greg Olsen corrected him in some instances where I'm like sitting back and I usually scream at the TV like, no, that's not what happened. This is what happened. So I thought that was handled very tastefully.
And he does it all without really any hint of an ego. Like he
Right.
genuinely seems like he wants to help everyone understand the game as best as possible. And it's never condescending. Right. It's always in the name of helping. So first rose goes to Greg Olsen for an awesome game. Who do you got, Brandon?
Well, defensive lineman. One of my favorites. He had a stint with the Ravens, but more famously with the Broncos. And shout out to Aubrey for sending this our way. Derek Wolfe. Derek Wolfe, famous Cincinnati Bearcat, ironically enough, killed a mountain lion in his home in Colorado legally. It was a monster mountain lion that was terrorizing the neighborhood, had killed 2 dogs. And they were worried that it was going to move on to easier prey, which means kids and other dogs, I imagine. 175-pound mountain lion, Mike, that he very heads up play, took a amazing grizzly bear picture and was flaunting it on social media. And, obviously the PETA people were coming after him because, does this look like a big game picture? And we don't like those because that's not always done in the most upright manner. But the fact that he was able to save the neighborhood, he hunted this mountain lion for multiple days before end up taking it down. The way he explained it is like he's a call to the wild, or just like a novelist of sorts. I love that he is stepping away from football and stepping to his next calling of just being a grizzly man.
Yeah, big-time Grizzly Man energy. Everyone that remembers Derek Wolfe as a player, not surprised by this headline in the least. So good job by him saving the neighborhood there and protecting the rural community. Brandon, my second rose goes to Philadelphia Eagles fans. You talked about the city. They got creative in a way to get litty this weekend. The Philadelphia Eagles had the night game, and so because of that, there were limitations on when they could get in the parking lot to tailgate around Lincoln Financial Field. For anyone that's not been out to Philly, Lincoln Financial, the Wells Fargo Center where the Flyers and everyone play, and all these things are really close together and share a bunch of parking lots. They couldn't get into that parking lot until 4 p.m. for that game. However, a bunch of those lots opened up at 8 a.m. Saturday morning because the National Lacrosse League, which is the indoor league, had the Philadelphia Wings taking on the Toronto Rock. So a bunch of Eagles fans got creative and decided to financially support lacrosse in the name of getting into those parking lots and getting drunk earlier. So shout out to them, Brandon. Tailgate ingenuity that paid off in a very raucous environment for a division game in the divisional round.
Hey, Bradley Cooper is somewhere proud.
Amen. Amen. Making it happen. Who do you got for your second rose, Brandon?
Well, I got to go home to L.A. And I got to give my rose to Shannon Sharpe. Excuse me for saying the other one's name first. And for some reason, his antics at this Laker game, where the Lakers beat the Memphis Grizzlies, big win for the Lakers. We'll talk about that later. And without Anthony Davis, who's coming back this week. Apparently, Dylan Brooks got into it with LeBron. Shannon Sharpe was down there on the floor, let Dylan Brooks know that he doesn't want anything with LeBron, that he can't guard him. Dylan Brooks yelled over at him. Then Shannon Sharpe told him that he didn't want any, because I imagine Dylan Brooks probably doesn't want to fight Shannon Sharpe. And Shannon Sharpe is also always down for the cameras, always down for the action, always down for the tussle, apparently. He ended up getting into it with John Morant's dad, T. Morant, and a big scuffle that looked like an episode of The Real Housewives hit NBA. It was all drama and felt like everyone's wasted time, but definitely filled everyone's timeline up on social media when they woke up the next day. So shouts out to Shannon Sharpe being content on and off his work days. Incredibly
memeable content.
And LeBron.
Yeah, LeBron came out after the game and had his back, said he'll rock with Unk 24/7, 365, and 366 on leap year. No, like that's all. Like, Brandon, it was incredibly entertaining. Like, if people want to get upset about this, feel free and go ahead. I'm going to choose to laugh at this. It is funny that Shannon Sharpe got called out for being hypocritical because he went on Undisputed and a while back called out fans sitting courtside who were acting an ass and acting up just because they paid a bunch of money to be in those courtside seats. So it was a real do as I say, not do as I do, not as I do moment for Shannon Sharpe there. I do appreciate that after the game he gave Dave McMenamin a quote. And he talked about how John Morant and who was the other player that he was talking to?
Dylan Brooks.
John Morant and Dylan Brooks didn't want any smoke and conveniently left out the other player for the Grizzlies that was over there in one Steven Adams. Because as Brandon, the internet cannot agree on anything ever at any time. But waking up that next morning, the one thing we all universally agreed upon, Steven Adams would be more than happy with that smoke. That Steven Adams is about that life. That Steven Adams, who is a legitimate mountain man, who has terrifying feats of strength all over his resume, is not the one to mess with. And for as jacked and football player as Shannon Sharpe is, and as hilarious as Dylan Brooks calling him a pedestrian when asked about it in the postgame was, Steven Adams' name was purposely, I believe, omitted because Shannon Sharpe understands and respects that that man's big is a little bit bigger than his big, and it's okay to admit that.
Yeah, the real life Aquaman, who is Australian, which is enough of a wild card to not mess with in the first place. One of the strongest players in the NBA. The fact that he's on the floor still at this ripe old age of however old he is and still banging and making the Memphis Grizzlies a contender. Shannon knows he don't want problems with him. And that was the guy who was mainly in his face. And like you said, left his name out because he does not want the smoke.
By the way, just clerical error because I know there are people who care. Not Australian. He's a Kiwi. He's from New Zealand. So
New Zealand.
Yes.
I apologize.
And it's also a reminder that when you look at Steven Adams, who looks incredibly old, he's a 6'11" mountain man who, to your point, looks like Aquaman. He is 29 years old. He is south of 30. He looks like he could be my dad.
Yeah, the oldest 29-year-old I've ever seen. I mean,
yes.
In my life.
Yes, and terrifyingly large. So, shout out to everyone involved in that situation for giving us something incredibly entertaining to laugh at and probably being the most important headline to come out of a Lakers game so far this season.
Oh, God. I mean, it overshined a great win, which is unfortunate, but we'll get the eyes when it's time.
Brandon, as far as great moments for us this weekend, the only blemish on my weekend full of great moments as far as the picks was that Bills game. 3-1 this weekend. Jags plus 8.5, Eagles minus 7.5, and 49ers minus 3.5. All wins in the division round. You went oppo for me on all those picks. So 1-3, which means I am now 58, 63, and 4 on the year. What?
No. I picked the Jags to cover. So I'm even in my picks.
Okay, my mistake.
Yes, Jacksonville. It was 8.5. Money line Giants. No. Bengals. Thank you for that. Yes, and Cowboys plus 4. No. So.
Okay, there we go. So again, that was on the weekend, inching closer towards 500 for your boy on the season. Again, 58, 63, and 4. But we'll keep fighting the good fight on this one, Brandon. In the meantime, it is time to ask the most important question of the day. Before we get out of here, do you know, Brandon, what time it is?
I never meant to hurt you. I never meant to make you cry. But tonight, I'm this, that, and the third.
Yeah, you're never going to go wrong there. Again, my first rap song that I ever got exposed to was Lose Yourself by Eminem. So as you can imagine, the first artist I latched onto was Eminem, which for a suburban white kid is the least surprising headline of all time. So, Brandon, well done.
That second, I'm sorry, Gojo kind of sounded like DMX. I was like, oh, a little Rough Rider voice. Okay.
Damn. Rest in power to DMX there. If you feel like celebrating Brandon Newman, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review Gojo wherever you get your podcast. 5-star rating, review. Let him know what a great job he is doing. The other voice that you hear, super producer Aubrey Marcinko, joining us for this, that, and the third, because we got some very important topics to get to, one of which she has become our official correspondent of. So let's get it started, guys, and get to this as we burn through 3 quick headlines to finish off the day with this. Former Malcolm in the Middle star Frankie Muniz announced last Wednesday that he's going to compete in NASCAR. He's joining the ARCA Menard Series and is going to be driving the number 30 Ford Mustang for Rhett Jones Racing, making his debut on February 18th. Now, apparently this has always been a dream of his. Apparently, Frankie, he's 37 years old and at one point took a break. In 2006, he went and competed in the Formula BMW USA tour, earning 0 overall points through 14 races, and later worked in the Champ Car Atlantic Championship from 2007 to 2009 before he broke his back in a season-ending crash. So a little shocked. This is wild career turn. Friend of the pod, Jason Fitz, went from the band Perry to radio. This one potentially more painful. So good luck to you, Frankie. I hope it works out.
To me, like, when I saw this, it just made me think of like Harry Potter, Daniel Radcliffe, right? Like after Harry Potter, he started doing all those like photo shoots where he was like super ripped and shirtless. And I was like, no, you are Harry Potter. You will always be Harry Potter. Don't try to step out.
Well,
this is Malcolm in the Middle. You're Malcolm in the Middle.
I feel like I loved him as was it Big Liar? Was that the film that Frankie Muniz was in with Paul? I never always mess his last name up, but he was a great child at Cody Banks. If you guys remember, like
Agent Cody Banks, yeah.
Yep.
I loved myself some Frankie Muniz. So in the fact that he's found another life, like I can quietly root for it. You know what I mean? As somebody who is originally a podcaster and will be famous for my acting and television writing skills, I can respect it a little bit. But God bless him. God bless him.
I saw he had been racing, I guess, competitively for like 16 years.
Yeah, he
like since 2006, right? I think that's
he went back and had been racing in 2006. Already broke his back doing this, so he's already paid some prices in this.
He's got some cred.
And I mean, listen, is this really any more of like a? Because to your point, I know it's hard sometimes to accept actors who go on to different roles. I was talking about this the other day with John Krasinski now in that new series that he's in on Amazon Prime, where he plays like a former military man. And in the first episode, to show you this isn't Jim Halpert anymore, he takes off his shirt and he's jacked and he's got all these scars on his back. It's Jack Ryan.
Yes.
And
yeah,
you know, in Malcolm in the Middle, I mean, wasn't Bryan Cranston the dad on that show?
Yes.
Like now he's more known for being a meth cook.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. This one for me though, he's always Malcolm in the Middle, and
apparently he's about to be Malcolm in the middle of the track. So we wish him well in his endeavors here. At Gojo Show on Twitter, what's the weirdest celebrity acting to sports turn that we could possibly get out of all of this, besides Kevin James becoming Sean Payton in a movie? Let's get to that, as this is actually in the world of sports. This courtesy of Michael David Smith over at Yahoo, where there were some comments from Buccaneers, according to NFL media reports, that several Buccaneers players felt that after their interactions with Brady following the game, that he had played his last game in Tampa. One player said, "I'd be surprised if he's back," and another said he sounded like a person that's saying goodbye for good. So, I don't believe at this point he's done playing football, but it is fascinating now that we have potentially reached the point where Tom Brady is at the end of career, where it's just he's chasing the high by putting on whatever jersey he needs to now.
Yeah, and this will be his second time with free agency, right? I don't know. I'll just throw this out there before people attack me. I'm a Peyton Manning fan. I grew up half my life in Indiana, so there's to say that. He's just always a little dramatic to me, and at this point, like with his words, it's kind of like Boy Who Cried Wolf, so I don't really believe anything. Again, like to your point, I don't think he's done, but I do think he will leave Tampa Bay.
Well, I've have you guys ever been in a situation where you had to hide the finality of the goodbye? Like, it's a tough situation to be in. Like, you really want to, like, tell these people, like, goodbye. And they're like, wait a minute, I thought you're not coming. Like, I guess I Irish goodbye enough that I've gotten caught, like, hey, man, it's been really good to see you. Like, you're not leaving, are you? It's like, yeah.
Well, like Tom Brady wouldn't be able to Irish goodbye if he ever wanted to. Like, we saw in that last press conference, he was thanking all of the media there. Be like, you guys have a hard job, and I appreciate the way you've covered this. And you regulars, I hope I've given you that same respect back. Like, it felt very similar to Aaron Rodgers and the theatrics of that walk-off in Green Bay. Since then, his comments have reflected differently. We'll see if Tom's are any different. I will say, because we know he's going to try and go to a contender, it makes what happens with this 49ers postseason run fascinating. Because if Kyle Shanahan were to come up one quarterback short yet again if they got to the Super Bowl, who knows what that franchise might be capable of, is all I'm saying. So we'll wait and see how that pans out.
I kind of want him to go back to the Patriots.
I think if there's one thing I am willing to, if I put money down right now and said what I absolutely think won't happen, it's that him and Bill Belichick will never be able to swallow their pride and make that work again. I think that is done. I don't think those guys are going to be able to coexist anymore. We are in oil and water mode with Bill and Tom right now. So we'll wait and see, though. It would be an incredibly entertaining version of this result. But let's get to the most entertaining thing in the third. Because anyone who was watching football over this weekend, at some point along the way, probably saw commercials for Farmer Wants a Wife, a new dating show, reality dating show about rural couples trying to find loves for farmers who are going to be looking for their love on this upcoming reality dating show. Aubrey, as someone we've established the first time you hopped on this podcast with us, you were someone who was courted by why am I blanking?
A producer.
By a producer for Love is Blind.
Love is Blind.
And so thus have the most reality dating experience of any of us here as our reality dating show correspondent. How interested were you in this show when you saw the previews for it during the game?
Highly interested. For years I've always joked about getting a Farmers Only account. Just for fun, just to see what's on there. But then the more research I started doing into this, it's been in, it was like 32 different countries, 180 marriages, and 410 children have come out of this show. And it was back in the US, like the CW had it, like a season, a version of it back in like 2008. It got like 2.2 on IMDb out of 10. But like it's a show. It started in the UK, but there's just been all these spinoffs.
Wow. All right. I was simply unaware. So this is a well-proven track record. This is like when the dating apps on the commercials flaunt their success rate here. This one actually seems to have churned out some winners, albeit volume shooting.
Right. I was like Googling it, and when it's like other people ask other things come up, it was like Farmer Wants a Wife. I thought it said in us, like, is there a farmer who wants a wife in all of us? I was like, well, maybe, but then I realized it was US. I was like ready to pull this out.
Big yeehaw energy.
I had to pull it out. This is the basic winery hat for women. This is every girl wears this to a winery. It's my smoke show, the bear hat. So I had to bring it out for this. And also I didn't know too, so they have a spinoff in Australia. It's their most popular dating show there.
Wow. Listen. That's surprising to me because, like, I understand the premise is, like, you take a bunch of girls from the city, you bring them out on the farm. The Bachelor's done dates where they bring people out and they have them do manual labor and watch how everyone reacts or loses it. Right. Australia is fascinating to think about with that setting because everything there, literally everything on an island that used to just be one gigantic prison island is designed to kill you. All of the spiders are gigantic and scary. Everything is poisonous. And so the thought of having to exist in that kind of farming environment scares the shit out of me.
Right? And I'm just ready for all the memes and like all the articles that are, there's one, it was like 4 hunky like hoe bearing men, but they meant like, like hoe, like a garden hoe. But I read it like differently. And then it was like, let's hope these women are fertile. I'm just like,
I mean, I can already say I'm
I'm so ready for it.
I got a tweet in drafts right now watching the show. It's like, you ain't going to get nowhere with hoeing like that. I'm just saying, like, you know what I'm saying? Can't do it. Can't do it. But
I think it was Peter Burns, like, tweeted. He was like, every time I see this, like, while I'm watching the playoffs, he's like, I think it's a Key and Peele skit.
It does. It seems like, and we're veering dangerously close now to where I feel like we're going to be able to, at some point soon, reverse engineer Fear Factor into a reality dating show. That, to me, is where the rubber meets the road on this. For anyone that doesn't know, Joe Rogan, before he became an incredibly controversial podcast host, was the host of Fear Factor, one of the greatest game shows in the history of planet Earth. And I feel like we've waited a long enough time now to where we can take that and repurpose it into a dating show that's kind of a couple standard deviation points away from Farmer Wants a Wife.
What would you call that?
Fear Factor meets reality dating.
We need some names, people.
Yeah, fear of love, something like that. Something mixed up in there. I will say, I do have more faith in this Farmer Wants a Wife series now that I know this adaptation for something overseas. Because one thing USA does very well is bite off of other people's shit, especially in television, and make it our own and make
Look
it
at The Office. That was UK based.
Exactly.
Look how well that did.
Exactly.
I also found out there's one of the farmers that went to school at UNCC, and his farm is 50 miles away from here. I might just roll up with my
you know what? It sounds like a great subplot to the series right now. I think the producers would love that. We already know that producers love reaching out to you, so this seems like destiny here. I'm excited to see the crop, and pun fully intended there, of farming influencers that come off of this, because if every reality dating show is just a bunch of people that are trying to find their way into a little bit of influencer cash, I gotta feel like that there's a world where there's a bunch of farming influencers just waiting to come up here and sprout and grow into the people.
Well, look at all the Yellowstone followers. I feel like I could ask that at least once a week, and then I get like hounded if I hadn't seen it.
It's the perfect storm. We were at the perfect time.
It's like the new thing on dating apps, how all the guys used to be like, looking for the Pam to my gym. Now it's like everything says, looking for my Beth.
Well, speaking of Beth, I don't know if she's here, but I'm down to watch some hot girls do step in some shit and shovel some stuff, and also I'm selfishly glad they found a black farmer for season 1 of the U.S. version.
All-inclusive experience here that we are looking for. We hope you enjoy the all-inclusive experience that is this podcast. If you did, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review Gojo wherever you get them. Leave us a 5-star rating and a review, and check us out on the DraftKings YouTube channel under the Gojo with Mike Golick Jr. tab. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Boom. Money in the bank.